had 15 councillors on the council. A third didn't turn up to the budget meeting. Of those who did, one quit the group and announced he'd joined Restore Britain and then accused his former colleagues of corruption. This week, another of their councils announced that he'll be standing down. Astonishingly, since they were elected only last May, almost 1 in 10 Reform UK councillors across the country have either defected to other parties, resigned or been sacked. We don't have to imagine anymore what Reform UK-led councils would be like. We see the impact of their incompetent and uncaring approach every day. In Nottinghamshire, the Reform-led County Council banned a local newspaper from accessing press releases and interviews, the so-called press ban. Having promised to cut taxes, Reform-led Worcestershire County Council are hiking up council tax by 9%. The record of Reform-led councils is clear. Broken promises, endless infighting, and a complete failure to help the residents they were elected to serve. Our residents deserve so much better than that. But we all know why some people feel tempted to vote for Reform UK or indeed the Green Party. Opposition is easy, and so is populism. Pointing out the failings of this government really isn't difficult. So many of us feel badly let down by the Labour Party. After years of Conservative failure, we hoped for something far, far better. In December, I received a letter from the local government minister asking me if I would like to cancel local elections due to take place in Watford in May, because the government is reorganising councils in our area. My wife thought this was a great idea. I think she'd already actually started planning our Easter holiday. But I immediately said no. Not because I don't like spending time with my family, but because democracy should be the basis of local government in our country. Liberal Democrat-led councils around the country said the same thing. It's up to residents to decide who has the honour to serve as elected members. Now, can you imagine if during the coalition years, when we were sorting out the economic mess left by the last Labour government, we had announced that local elections were too expensive and too much of a distraction to go ahead? Labour would have been rightly apoplectic, and there's no doubt they would still be going on about it to this day. We should not be too kind to Labour. They know that they're doing badly in the ballot box, but democracy is fundamental to local government in our country. It's frankly incredible that in such a cat-handed way they thought that they could cancel elections which will result in their party losing many seats. Residents get to decide who runs our councils, even if the party of government doesn't like their choices. Now, the major political issue in Watford is Labour's failure to deliver the long-promised rebuild of our local hospital. This is one of the infamous 40 new hospitals promised by Boris Johnson that the Conservatives failed to deliver. Before the last election, Labour politicians told us they would get this built. Almost as soon as they took office, they said this project would be delayed, along with many others. A recent National Audit Office report showed that in Watford we won't have our new hospital until 2038. This is simply unacceptable. NHS patients and staff deserve better than being told by Labour politicians that they have to put up with crumbling buildings for decades until they're eventually rebuilt. People voted for change and rightly feel let down by a Labour government that lacks ambition or a clear direction. If people want to know what our party stands for, our record in local government is a good place to start. Liberal Democrats have just under 3,200 councillors across the UK, and we currently lead 75 councils across England and Wales. Liberal Democrat councils are responsible for over £17 billion of public spending. We lead or are part of the administration of councils that serve 13 million people. Now, I am a very humble man with a great deal to be humble about, but it would be remiss of me not to mention some of the great things we're doing in Watford. So as my time is limited, I will highlight just 5 of these things that we've achieved. Firstly, we've invested in 17 award-winning green flag parks, the highest number in Hertfordshire. Both of our leisure centres have been independently assessed as outstanding. We have never increased Watford's council tax by more than the rate of inflation, and this year it's being frozen. We have worked with homelessness charities to reduce the number of rough sleepers, provide a winter night shelter and increase our outreach support. We were the first district council in the country to introduce a bike share scheme, and this has now been used for over 650,000 journeys. And 5B, we've achieved my manifesto commitment to plant 20,000 trees 2 years ahead of schedule. We've refurbished and reopened the Watford Coliseum. We've provided free community events throughout the year. We're cleaning up our River Colne. We're delivering a green loop to help improve cycling and walking around the town. We're in the top 10 in the country for EV charging points. We've made Watford a more dementia-friendly place. We're improving community shopping parades across the town. Our local plan is helping us to deliver more affordable and council homes too. And we've allocated £1 million to community groups from the money we receive from developers. We have implemented 95% of the commitments I made to residents when I stood for election in 2022. Liberal Democrats in local government delivering for the people we serve. In recent years, we've received a number of awards too. One of them was at our party's conference in autumn, where we won the Diversity Award for our diverse and growing group of councillors. We've worked hard to make sure that our councillors reflect the community that we serve and come from all walks of life, bringing their insights and wisdom to the decisions that we made. We also won the IEASY Award for Council of the Year and were a finalist in the Local Authority of the Year, the prestigious MJ Awards. But that was won by Liberal Democrat-led Stockport Council. I, for one, was delighted for them. One of the big differences between Liberal Democrat-run councils and the rest is that we see our job as bringing people together to get things done. The views of our residents aren't an afterthought. We don't carry out consultations for the sake of it, providing lip service to the idea that residents' views matter. Our residents' views are central to everything we do. One of the reasons we've seen the rise of populists of all types is that people feel disconnected from the people they elect. Liberal Democrats in local government are the best antidote to that, bringing people together to get things done. There are two things that could make this role more difficult in the years ahead. Local government reorganisation was not in Labour's manifesto, but now takes up so much time for many of us in local government. It's important that through this process we remain true to our core values and belief in localism. Now, Labour uses the language of devolution, but their instincts are to centralise, taking power away from our communities. We must not be willing handmaids in the creation of mega councils, covering vast areas with huge populations and remote from the people we seek to serve. These are being created in the name of efficiency savings. But what value do we place on local councils that are totally embedded in their communities and delivering with and for their residents? We must always be the party of local government, arguing for power to be decentralised to local communities who know their areas best. We need to empower local communities so that they can get things done, not go along with Labour's policy of centralising power and moving it away from the people we want to serve. Now, one of the reasons Labour is reorganising councils is the perilous financial state that so many face. I would like to pay tribute to Liberal Democrat teams who are responsible for county councils, unitaries and metropolitan councils. Every day they grapple with incredibly difficult financial situations. Last year, councils spent over £26 billion on adult social care, around 40% of all spending by all councils. Almost half of councils who are responsible for social care have either already applied for support from central government or say they are likely to in the years ahead. The government cannot ignore the crisis in local government finance any longer. We urgently need a comprehensive review of the local government funding so that we have a fair, sustainable and long-term system in place. Now, like the rest of you, I like nothing more than pointing at potholes and getting them fixed. But we need to be honest. Potholes are often the result of councils not having enough money to maintain their roads properly. We will only fix potholes when we fix local government finance. We need to be tough on potholes and tough on the causes of potholes. I would just add as an aside, it's worth remembering that the main reason local councils and so many other public services lack the resources they need is that the UK economy has barely grown for over a decade. It's beyond doubt that Brexit has made our country poorer, meaning we have less money for public services. Those of us on the front line in local government see the impacts of this economic mess every day. People turning up to our town halls who are homeless, food banks that have never been busier, public services under enormous pressure. Brexiteers helped create that financial mess, and Labour aren't bold enough to fix it. Should we now put the people responsible for this mess in charge of council budgets? The elections in May offer residents in Watford and across the country a clear choice. If you feel let down by Labour, so do we. If you want to stop Reform UK from dividing our communities, vote Liberal Democrat. We will work tirelessly to bring people together and get things done, making life better for everyone. Thank you, Conference.
We're now going to move on to F18. I'd like to thank my aide, Chris Adams, I forgot his surname there, and I'm going to pass it over to Hannah Kitchen for our policy motion on Trump and the wider world.
Good morning, Conference, and welcome to F18, Trump and the Wider World, which you will find on page 48 of the standard printed agenda and page 20 of Conference Extra. This was a late-taken motion, and FCC has agreed a number of drafting amendments to the motion and has also taken 2 amendments, which you can find on page 10 of Conference Daily. Can I please remind all speakers to keep to time this morning? I now ask Charlie Maynard from Witney to stand by, and I call Callum Miller from Bicester and Woodstock to propose the motion.
Good morning, Conference. It is a real privilege to present this important motion today. Donald Trump and his radical administration have destabilised the world and made the UK less secure. Representing the party in Parliament, we have been challenged every day to think carefully about how we position our party's response on the key questions of defence, security and trade. This is your chance, Conference, to consider and debate these positions. I very much hope that you will feel able to endorse them as party policy. Conference, when I spoke this time last year, I described how Donald Trump was deeply undermining the foundations of the liberal, rules-based order. Things have only got worse in the last 12 months. Just since January, he has abducted President Maduro of Venezuela, an illegitimate leader who ought instead have been pressured to relinquish power through economic and diplomatic means. He has threatened our NATO ally Denmark with the annexation of Greenland, even warning of economic retaliation against countries like the UK, who stood up for her national sovereignty. He has shown slavish support to the extremist and expansionist agenda of Netanyahu's security cabinet, which is explicitly designed to stop a two-state solution. He has sought to establish a pay-to-play rival to the United Nations, his so-called Board of Peace, which frankly looks more like a rogues gallery than a serious international institution. And he has launched an illegal attack on Iran with Netanyahu, dragging Britain down a slippery slope towards another war in the Middle East. Just this morning, having berated the UK last week for not rushing to join the war, he has begged us to send warships to the Strait of Hormuz. And all the time, Trump's war is driving up prices at the pumps and doing grave damage to the world economy. But Trump's behaviour is not only ill-considered and inconsistent, it is deeply dangerous. He joined Netanyahu in launching war in Iran despite Russia's ongoing assault on Ukraine. And distracted by oil prices that he failed to foresee, this week we saw Trump take the extraordinary step of lifting US sanctions on Russian oil and gas. Thanks to his war on Iran, he has now agreed to finance the Russian war machine that's not only murdering Ukrainian civilians and abducting their children, but also arming and supplying the Iranians with the drones that will lengthen his new war. It is madness. Conference, not only has Trump consistently undermined the international rule of law, we've also seen the Trump White House commit to what can only be described as a more insidious programme. Last November, Trump alleged there was what he called civilization erasure in Europe. His national security strategy then set out his administration's intention to interfere directly in British and European politics by bolstering far-right movements across the continent. It is not enough for Trump to destroy the international system based on law and diplomacy. He is also hell-bent on exporting his brand of vile and divisive politics around the world. So how should we answer this challenge? How can we deepen our alliances with other liberal democracies? How can we insulate ourselves from this corrosive politics? And how can we strengthen our security now that we can't rely on an ally in the White House? Conference, this motion aims to provide an answer, a liberal answer, which provides a credible plan to bolster our defences at home, affirms our commitment to international law, strengthens our security ties with our reliable allies, and sets out a robust approach to challenge Trump's warmongering and attempts at foreign interference. Conference, if passed, this motion would commit us to introducing a defence bonds programme, a responsible way urgently to raise funding for our armed forces. We had years of the Conservatives mismanaging and hollowing out our military, and today Trump displays naked antagonism towards European security. This investment can't come soon enough. This motion would also expand the UK's defence and trade ties with partners we know we can rely upon, particularly in Europe and the Commonwealth, and strengthen Britain's soft power. This would include deepening ties with Denmark and Greenland, making clear that we stand with them in the face of Trump's bullying and threats of annexation. When Al Pinkerton and I visited Greenland in February, we were told how Trump's threats had visited mental terror on Greenlanders. Since then, Trump has had the incredible cheek to send a hospital ship, even though we heard from islanders who had postponed necessary treatment which they were happy and able to receive in Denmark because they were frightened that Trump might invade while they were away. Conference, I'm grateful to the movers of the two excellent amendments to the motion, my colleagues Charlie Maynard and Lisa Smart, and I would urge Conference to approve both of them. Amendment 1 would commit us to explore legal options to secure compensation from the US administration for UK exporters who were hit by Donald Trump's unconstitutional tariffs, while Amendment 2 would commit us to conduct a standalone review into the extent of US interference in British politics, including the extent to which extremists like Tommy Robinson are being actively supported by the White House. Conference, the Liberal Democrats are the only party prepared to stand up to Trump and to take steps to strengthen the UK in the face of his belligerence. The Trump fan club in Reform and the Conservatives certainly won't do it. The Greens' defence policies would weaken the UK's security, dragging us out of NATO and cancelling Trident, the ultimate guarantor of our security. And Labour either drag their feet or bite their tongue. But whichever it is, they won't stand up to Trump's bullying of our reliable allies. So, Conference, let's back this motion and let's send a clear message that it is only the Liberal Democrats who will stand up to Trump, invest in the UK's defence, extend our soft power and deepen security and economic ties with our European partners. Thank you.
Thank you. I now ask Lisa Smart to stand by and call Charlie Maynard from Witney to propose Amendment 1.
Good morning, Conference. I'm speaking in favour of this motion and in favour of Amendment 1. And that is because we are the party that has always been the party of free trade. We remain the party of free trade, and we always will be the party of free trade. We are internationalists. We believe that we all benefit when we cooperate and we trade freely with each other, whether that's countries, as societies, and as individuals. And in the process, we also make our world safer. However, Donald Trump doesn't believe that. The economic harm he has inflicted through his tariffs has done huge damage on our world, and that is on top of the vast military damage that he is currently inflicting. Thankfully, a few weeks ago, the US Supreme Court struck down those tariffs, finding them unconstitutional and illegal and in breach of his executive powers. More than 2,000 American companies are now seeking compensation from the US government for those tariffs. But it wasn't just American companies that got whacked. It was British companies and British workers that also got whacked. And we need to help those British workers because those British factories are now trading less with the US. 1 in 5 have either reduced or entirely stopped trading with the US. So the Supreme Court ruling is helpful in that it states clearly that these tariffs are illegal, but there's no timeline and there's no process. And since that announcement nearly a month ago, our UK government has done nothing to help British businesses get their money back. Our government is, as ever, frightened to offend Trump, even when he's been struck down by his own Supreme Court. Conference, we need a government. We need a Liberal Democrat government that will stand up for free trade, stand up for Britain's workers and businesses, and will stand up against Trump. So please, vote in favour of this amendment number 1 and for this excellent motion as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. I now ask Christina Noel to stand by and call Lisa Smart from Hazel Grove to propose Amendment 2.
Thank you, Chair. Conference. I will be one of the first to say that British politics isn't perfect. In fact, it is far from perfect. But it's ours. Donald Trump wants to change that. He wants to export his brand of destabilising and corrosive politics to the UK. And he said as much explicitly in his national security strategy last November. And this document, it derides Europe, including the UK, for failing to share Trump's divisive nationalist ideology. And this strategy talks in stark and profoundly sinister terms. At the heart of its agenda is a call to cultivate resistance across Europe, including here at home. To remove those aspects of our culture and our politics that offend the Trumpian White House and their nationalist agenda. And these are not just words. The US State Department now proudly boasts that it will flood MAGA think tanks and campaigning bodies in the UK with money, with hard cash. They intend nothing less than a full-on assault of our democratic institutions and our very social fabric. And they have willing allies. Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch seem determined to outcompete each other in offering Britain up as a willing puppet for Trump's America. Meanwhile, so-called Tommy Robinson, egged on by the MAGA movement, promotes thuggery on our streets. It is now an urgent matter of national security that we establish the full extent of interference by Trump and his cronies in our politics. How is this man, who says that legitimate election results are fake news, and he spreads fear and division in his own country, how is he seeking to manipulate our country and our politics? Who is benefiting from the money of his allies? The amendment to this motion, if approved, would call for a standalone probe into the extent of Trump's influence and interference operations in Britain. We know that Donald Trump is no longer content just to pollute America with his toxic brand. He wants to export that kind of strongman politics everywhere, including to our shores. Conference, we cannot let that happen. So I encourage you to vote in favour of this amendment for this excellent motion as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. I now ask Josh Matthews to stand by and call Christina Noel from Ealing.
Good morning, Conference. I'm here to speak in favour of this motion, which is desperately needed in response to the, frankly, despotic and psychotic regime that is in Washington, D.C. As some of you may know me directly or were at my panel last night, I am an American citizen. In fact, Conference, my family members and descendants have called the United States a home since before it was a concept. Instead, we have watched as Trump has degraded the rights of American citizens, destroyed any institution and semblance of international law, and their military and cabinet do not only violate international law, they post it as if it was trophies. While it may be a somewhat stereotypical Liberal Democrat thing for me to say, I think this motion is fantastic but does not go far enough. In lines 83 to 86, it touches extremely well on the Board of Peace. But I fear that this language does not simply focus so heavily on what we need to be showing with this. It speaks on the conditions for UK involvement. We should not put conditions on something that we cannot allow to happen. The Board of Peace is not a replacement for any international organization. It is instead solely a bullying organization with the intention of patting the ego of a deranged megalomaniac who unfortunately holds the title of President of the United States. I am extremely thankful, however, for this motion and the two amendments to it that recognizes that the United States that I grew up in and that so many have been able to call a steadfast ally is not the same United States. The paradigm has shifted, and unfortunately, the party's over. So I urge Conference to vote in favour of both these amendments and the motion as a whole, because frankly, this is not something that I can really say is much of importance.
Thank you, Conference. I now ask Claire Cape to stand by and call Josh Matthews from Lewisham.
Conference, I wanted to share just a short story to show just how dangerous Trump has been in removing the US, but also actively sabotaging global climate and nature collaboration. Whether it's withdrawing the US from the Paris Agreement or actively sabotaging an oceans treaty that had been ongoing for years right at the last moment. If you want to look no further than the UK Army, there was a climate conference a few years back. The keynote speaker was a senior officer, and it could not have been more unequivocal about how both climate and nature are so interlinked with global security, whether it's the short term, whether it's the long term, or how those link together. In the short term, they were clear. It's energy efficiency, supply chain resilience, water materials scarcity. In the long term, it's migration, it's conflict, and it's dealing with flooding and wildfires at home and abroad. The Liberal Democrats and the UK have to step up, have to lead, have to maintain that collaboration where others, especially the US, are currently failing. Thank you.
Thank you. I now ask James Holt to stand by and call Claire Cape from Clippenham. Claire Cape, are you in the hall this morning? Okay.
Thank you. Good morning, conference. Here we are in wonderful York again, and it's all over so quickly. Liberal Democrats are a progressive party, there's no doubt about that. That was clear in the packed-out fringe with Ros Savage, Leila Moran and Carl Cashman yesterday. We are committed to upholding international law and human rights. Our approach to international relations needs to be completely human rights informed. Trump's expansionist behaviour, as demonstrated by his threats regarding Greenland and actions in Venezuela, is illegal, as we've heard. But the motion failed to emphasise sufficiently Trump's ongoing partnership with Netanyahu's government in Israel, demonstrated by the attack 2 weeks ago in Iran. And of course, since. Netanyahu is driven by what? The ultra-right-wing Kahanist theocrats want to extend Israel beyond its current borders with Palestine, which are already well beyond the borders agreed in 1967. An Israeli, David, I met a few years ago in Jerusalem, shared his political analysis with me. We can already see his predictions becoming a reality in the West Bank and Lebanon. Where next? Syria, Jordan, Turkey? Trump said he didn't want to start wars. So who has driven him to carry out the attacks on Iran, wrecking the security across the Middle East, in Israel, Palestine, the UAE, Saudi, Iraq and beyond, and allowing the global economic instability from which the UK and Europe will suffer most, while benefiting Russia and China. The special relationship the UK has enjoyed with the US is effectively dead, while Trump is in power. My American ex observed a few years ago that America is still fighting its civil war. Surely it's time to leave them to it and build the relationships that will benefit this country and our place in the world. Trump's board of peace for Gaza is ill-conceived at best. It is typically arrogant of him. It should be completely junked and replaced by a UN-led approach, co-created with the Palestinians and other players in the region. Let's vote against this motion and be the very bold, progressive Liberal Democrats we want to be. Thank you.
Thank you. I now ask Adrian Healey-Trek to stand by and call James Holt from Shrewsbury.
Good morning, conference. Thank you, Hannah. A few weeks ago, I was able to sit in a hospital in Jordan and meet children that had been evacuated from Gaza. I sat with a 5-year-old boy who was the same size as my 1-year-old daughter, malnourished, broken jaw, lost limbs. He was one of the more fortunate ones. Thousands of children need the same help. Charity can only go so far. The only truly way to make a difference seems to be politics, and right now, global politics is what's failing them. We are witnessing an absence of serious international engagement, and this is what it looks like. Children in hospital beds who get lucky, and thousands more who don't. The international community is not responding at anything like close to the scale of what is required. And because of the actions of this US administration, the scale is going to get worse. In my work with charities, from landmines to HIV, vaccines and climate, we have seen what happens when powerful nations withdraw. Funding is destroyed overnight. USAID was gutted on nothing more than a political whim to appeal to Elon's algorithm. People are dying right now as a result. This motion calls on Britain to strengthen its soft power and expand its multilateral partnerships. Soft power is not an abstraction. It's built by showing up, by being an internationalist country that others can rely on. If we stand here and condemn America's withdrawal from the world, It is the Liberal Democrats who must also hold this government to account when it heads in the same direction. These conflicts across the Middle East carry a real risk of displacement on a scale that we have not prepared for, and the pattern will repeat. The people who create the conditions for these crises will be the same people who weaponize the consequences against refugees, people least able to absorb them. And they do this for their own political gain at home and abroad. This party needs to be ready. I think that this motion shows that we are. I urge conference to support the motion as amended. Thank you.
Thank you. I now ask Sophie Crossthorne to stand by and call Adrian Healy-Lane-Trett from Lambeth.
Good morning, Conference. This morning I want to particularly focus on lines 34 to 36 of the motion and the destruction of the world order and the rules of laws which Trump is currently presiding over. As a Liberal, rule of law, established under international treaties and conventions, has kept world peace for the past 80 years. However, with this deranged man in the White House, all norms of behaviour with regards to fundamental human rights have begun to be excluded, even in his own country, where the practices of ICE and the targeting of minority groups, refugees, immigrants, LGBTQ+ people, can all be collateral damage in the pursuit of dictatorial control. The massive outcome of these actions only emboldens other dictators to behave in a similar way, to persecute and discriminate against particular minorities across the world. With no country leading the standards expected by international treaties and conventions, governing institutions being removed from any sense of worthiness, and the operation of removing long-held principles and founding tenets of international cooperation and the rule of law destroyed. With my international role on the Liberal International Human Rights Committee and the LGBTI Liberals of Europe board member, human rights, and in particular LGBTQ+ human rights, are under threat in countries where these have been fundamental tenets and origins of progress since the late 1960s. We can't let the founding nation of the Stonewall riots end up destroying and removing rights of LGBT+ people, for women, for ethnic minorities, for people with disabilities. It's a very slippery slope, and sadly, it has already started. Liberal Democrats have always been at the head of ensuring truth to power, and our fundamental values and rights, especially human rights, inclusive of LGBTQ+ rights, carry international weight in discussions across the world. Where human rights and the rule of law seek to be removed, we must not let this happen, and we must not let this deranged idiot in the White House remove any such protections and give green lights for Russian, Chinese and other authoritarian regimes around the world to behave in such an egregious manner. Please support the motion and the two super amendments to send a clear message from the Liberal Democrats to our country that we have a solid and serious international perspective, which is in contrast to all the other parties, including those particularly on the right, who have cozied up to Trump and are fundamentally damaging our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I now ask Duncan Brack to stand by and call Sophie Crossthorne from Sheffield.
Good morning, Conference. I'm Sophie Crossthorne and I'm the parliamentary candidate standing to win back Sheffield Hallam at the next general election. Thank you. When you step outside Sheffield City Hall, you'll find our Women of Steel statue, which takes us back through Sheffield's history. 1940, the Luftwaffe and air raid sirens bombardment during the Sheffield Blitz. Yorkshire women keeping our steelworks and munition lines going. Sheffield Steel powering the engines of the Spitfire. This wasn't just industry, this was values made metal, keeping our country safe. Now, Sheffield is never too far from that past. We're home to the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre, one of the UK's leading defence and aerospace hubs, two world-class universities, a heritage that's not just nostalgia, it's track record. The question isn't whether Sheffield can support Britain's defence again. The question is whether Britain will invest in Sheffield. Now, we all know why this is needed. No one in this room wants war or conflict. But the steps this motion calls for, alliance, strength and credibility, make that conflict far less likely. Trump's actions in Venezuela, Iran, his threats on Greenland, his sham board of peace handing Putin and Netanyahu exactly what they want. This is a president who treats international law like an option. He believes that the strong can just do as they please. And I've seen what that can cost. I've been to visit survivors of the Bosnian War. They were families torn apart from the Srebrenica genocide. We said never again. And I will not stand by whilst Nigel Farage tries to drag our country down Donald Trump's hateful path. Now, it's Paddy Ashdown's work in Bosnia that brought me to this party. Paddy understood that you can't just talk values. You have to be willing to defend them with steel, literally and figuratively. Now, he pushed for intervention whilst others did it. And we cannot be passive on the world stage. We are Paddy's party, and his legacy of principled courage is now more important than ever before. Now, the Labour government have no plan for our defence, and the Green Party, a party that wanted to leave NATO, have shown contempt for our local defence industry. They might be able to talk the talk, but you have to be prepared to walk the walk when it comes to defending our values. Because liberal values, they don't defend themselves. Democracy does not defend itself. We learnt that in the 1930s. We learnt it again in Bosnia, and we are learning it again today. Sheffield's Women of Steel knew it, Paddy Ashdown knew it, and this party knows it. Back the motion and the amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. I now ask Mark Pack to stand by and call Duncan Brack from Lambeth.
Thank you, Hannah. Conference security isn't only about bombs and missiles. Trump's threats to the safety of the world aren't only about his attacks on Venezuela and Iran, or his threats to Greenland, or to world trade, or to his interference in European politics. Potentially more serious than any of that is his undermining of the global framework of cooperation on climate change, an existential threat to human societies. Immediately on taking office last year, Trump signed an executive order instructing the US to start the process of withdrawing from the Paris Agreement, the treaty that commits nearly 200 countries to pursuing efforts to deliver a net zero economy during the second half of this century and to keep global temperature increases to well below 2 degrees. Countries have to give a year's notice of withdrawal, so on 27 January this year, the US formally exited the agreement, becoming the only UN member state to be outside it. But it wasn't only the Paris Agreement. In January, the US also withdrew from the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the International Renewable Energy Agency, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the World Health Organization, and 60 other international agreements and agencies, with more scheduled to follow. Withdrawal by itself is bad enough. It sets a precedent for others. It emboldens those who aim to stop progress, such as the petrostates who blocked the plans for a roadmap to transition away from fossil fuels at the climate summit in Brazil last year, but not agreed. It cuts significant funding from international initiatives. But worse than that, the US has gone further and bullied countries who are trying to uphold the principle of international cooperation. In October last year, the International Maritime Organization was set to agree a landmark global carbon pricing system for the shipping industry, binding emission reduction targets for shipping backed by a global carbon pricing scheme. The plans have been agreed in principle by scores of governments and by leading shipping businesses. But the US joined Saudi Arabia and Russia in opposing the plan and threatened to impose punitive tariffs on countries if they voted in favour. In the face of this intimidation, the proposal was shelved for a year. So Trump and his government pose a threat not just to this country or that. His actions are a threat not just to the principle of the international rule of law. They are a clear and present danger to the structure of global treaties and institutions that promote international cooperation, that bind countries together in pursuit of global common goals. This is a good motion, but it ought to have included that dimension, and it didn't. So I'm pleased that the movers agreed to draft in the new paragraph 5 that you'll see on page 10 of Conference Daily. That at least recognises the problem. Now let's see Liberal Democrats press the government on it, upholding the values of internationalism, of cooperation between nation-states, that is a consistent principle of liberalism and a consistent element of this party's approach and this party's policies. Please vote for the motion.
Thank you, Conference. I now ask David Chalmers to stand by and call Mark Pack from Islington.
Thank you, Chair. And it's nice to be here not talking about a constitutional amendment for a change. But Donald Trump's administration or Elon Musk doing something extreme or unpleasant is so commonplace that I think it's easy to overlook just how troubling their cheerleading for Tommy Robinson is. So let me just very briefly give you a short, incomplete extract from Tommy Robinson's CV. Conviction for assaulting an off-duty police officer. Community order after participating in a mass brawl. And another assault conviction. Jailed for using a false passport. Jailed for mortgage fraud. Jailed for contempt of court. Convicted of stalking. Jailed for contempt of court. You might begin to see a pattern there. Yet Elon Musk has looked at that pattern and decided to champion him. A State Department official looked at that record and decided to welcome him and do a happy, cheery photo on social media at the State Department. It's a list of worrying behaviour that Lisa added to in moving Amendment 2 earlier in this debate. So when we talk about the risks of the US government and billionaires interfering in our politics, they're not just seeking to defend their business self-interest, they're not just seeking to express freedom of speech or engaging in foreign policy debate. They're looking deliberately to support the very worst amongst us. They see violent thuggery and decide that is something to cheer on and encourage. And that's why we need to act. And the government's plans so far are so weak and so inadequate. Let me give you just one example. The Representation of the People Bill, currently going through Parliament, is meant to curb the influence of foreign money on our politics. But the safeguards are so low that all Donald Trump would need to do is take one of the UK companies that he owns, divvy up the ownership between him and his direct family, pump up its turnover a little bit by some financial transfers within the Donald Trump empire, and bingo, he would be able to donate unlimited sums of money direct into UK politics, even after the safeguards that Labour say they're introducing. Those really are no safeguards at all. That's why we need Amendment 2, it's why we need Amendment 1, and it's why we need the motion as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. As I've had no one speaking against either of the amendments, I'm not calling summators for the amendments. So I now call David Chalmers from North Hertfordshire and Stevenage to summate the motion.
Good morning, Conference. I'm going to... Conference. We have had a serious and passionate debate this morning, and I want to begin by thanking the proposer and everyone who has contributed. Before I go any further, perhaps a small piece of practical advice to those who have spoken so forcefully in this debate. You might want to think twice about booking a holiday in Florida anytime soon. Because if the behaviour of the current EU administration tells us anything, it is that criticism of President Trump is never warmly received. Now, that may sound like a joke, but behind it lies a serious point. For decades, the United Kingdom and the United States have shared one of the closest alliances in the world, built on shared democratic values, the rule of law and mutual trust. But as many speakers have argued today, that trust has been profoundly damaged. That special relationship, as one speaker said, is dead. We have heard about threats against Greenland, an autonomous Danish authority, and therefore against a NATO ally. illegal military action in Venezuela, unilateral strikes alongside his henchman Netanyahu against Iran in breach of international law, and a US strategy that openly talks about interfering in European politics. Together, these actions send a dangerous signal to the world. They suggest that international rules can simply be ignored, that sovereignty can be threatened, and that might makes right. And when that signal comes from the United States, it emboldens those who already seek to undermine the international system. It emboldens Vladimir Putin. It emboldens Xi Jinping. And it weakens the alliances that have helped maintain peace for decades. Now, the speakers mentioned, so Christina talked about the Board of Peace. You know, she's an American citizen, and how the impact that it's having on American citizens themselves, and the Board of Peace itself has nothing to do with that. Charlie talked to us about the free trade party, which is so important. Josh talked about sabotaging the world's attempts to protect the climate and the America's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement. Claire talked about the impact on human rights and how Trump's collaboration with the Netanyahu government actually undermines peace in the Middle East and throughout that region. James, who actually talked about how he'd been in Jordan and the real victims of Trump's actions, refugees, children in hospitals and dying. Adrian drew on his experience to talk about the LGBT community and others, refugees, immigrants, who are being so targeted and attacked in Trump's America. And Sophie reminded us of Sheffield's proud historic history, and also of the Bosnian War, and of our party that stood up, and of that word that we are Paddy's party of principled courage. And Duncan also reminded us of paragraph 5 of the global climate change, and how with Trump's and the US's withdrawal from those agreements actually undermines all the cooperation that we have within states and the protection of our world. And Mark talked about Tommy Robertson and the real threat that he poses to our democracy, and of Elon Musk's support for him. But we also heard something else in this debate, and let me just be absolutely clear about one thing. Our disagreement is not with the American people. It is with Trump's. Sorry, one second here. It is with Trump. It is a disagreement with the president and his criminal regime, who are undermining the democratic institutions many are fighting to protect. Across the United States, millions of Americans are standing up for democracy. Several speakers reminded us that there was an attempt to overturn the result of a democratic election in January the 6th. Conference, we must stand firmly with those Americans who are defending democracy.
Please bring your remarks to a close.
Conference, this is not simply a condemnation, it is a response. Please, I would ask you to support the motion and the 2 amendments as proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Conference. Just to note that we received a large volume of cards for this debate, as you can imagine, so apologies that we have not been able to take everyone who submitted a card. Okay, so we're now going to move to the votes. So first of all, we will have the vote on Amendment 1. Can I please see all those in the hall in favour? That's quite a lot of you. And can I please see all those against? Okay, we're just going to take a moment to check the online vote. Okay, and in the meantime, can I please take all those in favour of Amendment 2? Thank you. And all those against Amendment 2? Okay, that's pretty conclusive. Let's just check the online vote. That matches, so both of those amendments are carried. So we are now going to take the vote on the motion as amended by those 2 amendments. So in the hall, please, can I see all those in favour of the amended motion? Okay, and all those against? Again, I'm just going to give a minute for those online votes to come on, because when we have amendments, we have to wait for the amendments to be passed or otherwise before we open that online vote. So just bear with us one moment, please. Okay, that all matches up, so that amended motion is overwhelmingly carried. Thank you, Conference. I would like to thank my aide, Nick DaCosta, and I'm now handing over to Duncan Brack to chair the next session.
Thank you, Conference. If people would like to settle down and take their seats as quickly as possible. We are now moving on to the debate on the last debate of this conference, item F19, the Local Government Finance Emergency. You will find the text of the motion on pages 48 to 50 of the agenda, and there is one amendment for debate which you will find on pages 11 and 12 of Conference Daily. So will you please now settle down and either leave the hall or take your seat and stop talking so we can hear the speakers in this debate. I'd like to ask Helen Morgan, MP for North Shropshire, to stand by to propose Amendment 1. I now call to speak in favour of the motion Zoe Franklin, MP for Guildford, and the Parliamentary Spokesperson for Local Government to move the motion. Zoe.
Good morning, Conference. I hope you're all alive and alert after a wonderful evening. And I'd just like to say I went to my first Glee Club last night. I am still awake this morning. To get to the serious moment of this morning, as Liberal Democrats, we know that local government is the foundation of our democracy and our success as a party, and it's the part of government that has the most day-to-day impact on people and our communities. And I'm going to start by saying, for all of you in the room who are councillors, I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for all that you do. It is the council that fixes the pothole outside your home. It is the council that supports a child with special needs. It is the council that provides social care for an ageing parent. And yet today, councils across England are being asked to do more with less, year after year. The truth is simple. The system of local government finance is broken. Over the past decade, councils have been squeezed by rising demand for services while their core funding has failed to keep pace. Social care costs have risen, housing pressures have intensified, communities need more support, not less. And yet, the funding system remains short-term, uncertain and deeply unfair. Even with Labour's new multi-year settlements, local authorities are facing almost impossible decisions about which services they can afford to provide, and even looking into the face of inevitable effective bankruptcy. Libraries close, youth services disappear, preventative support is cut back. And when that happens, it is families, young people and vulnerable residents that pay the price. In Parliament, I've raised these issues, as have other MP colleagues, because the funding situation facing councils just simply cannot continue as it is. I'm grateful to the work of councillors and council leaders and council executive members across the country for the Liberal Democrats, who are working in impossible circumstances, delivering impressive services for their local residents and making a real Liberal difference. But speaking with them time and time again, they tell the same story of the challenges they face, which is why Liberal Democrats are pressing the government to repeal the so-called fair funding review. If it is anything, it is not fair. It does not deliver the funding local government so desperately needs. Instead of strengthening councils, it risks redistributing already scarce resources between local authorities, effectively taking funding from communities with a balanced chequebook to give it to others, without overdressing the overall shortfall. That is not a solution to the crisis in local government finances. I know that local government leaders want to plan for the long term. They want to invest in prevention, in communities and in local economic growth. But instead, they're being forced to operate under constant financial uncertainty. That is not sustainable governance. That is permanent crisis management. And I'll turn to my own region briefly, where it is absolutely abundantly clear. We are currently navigating a programme of local government reform, ostensibly because of the financial mess that the Conservatives got us into. And we know that reorganisation, which the government is forcing through, does not solve the fundamental problem. Without fixing how councils are funded, we are just moving financial pressures from one set of councils to another. So, Conference, the Liberal Democrats have always believed that power should sit as close as possible to the people it affects. Real devolution is not just about transferring responsibilities, it's about transferring resources, stability and trust. That means reforming outdated systems like council tax, which bear little relation to modern property values. It means giving councils greater fiscal autonomy so they can invest in the priorities for their communities. And it means recognising that local authorities are not simply delivery arms of Whitehall. They are democratic institutions in their own right who know their communities best. When local government is funded properly, communities can flourish. Councils can invest in prevention. They can support thriving town centres. They can strengthen the social fabric that holds communities together. But when councils are pushed to the brink financially, the consequences ripple through every part of local life. This motion sets out a path to a fairer and more sustainable system of local government finance. It is about restoring stability. It's about restoring fairness. And above all, it is about restoring trust in local democracy. And before I close conference, to let you all have the floor and share your stories, your thoughts, which I'm deeply looking forward to, I also want to recognise the amendment from my colleague Helen Morgan on social care. Social care is one of the single greatest pressures facing councils today, accounting for an ever-growing share of local authority budgets. Without addressing the social care crisis, it is impossible to put local government finances on a truly sustainable footing. Helen's amendment strengthens this motion by recognising that reality, and I encourage Conference you to support it. Conference, if we want thriving communities, if we want empowered local government, if we want decisions made closer to the people they affect, then we must fix the way local government is funded. So, Conference, I urge you to support the motion this morning and the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. Would Tony Vickers from West Berkshire please stand by? Now called to move Amendment 1. Helen Morgan, MP for North Shropshire and the party's spokesperson on health and social care.
Thank you. Good morning, Conference. I'd like to propose Amendment 1, which addresses the impact of the social care crisis on our councils. One of the major causes of financial distress in councils is the rising cost of social care. In my home of Shropshire, we're spending almost 80% of the council's budget on care, and the demand is rising every single year. Across the country, on average, local authorities are spending 2/3 of their budget on social care, and the recent hike in employers' NICs by the Labour government has made that much, much more of a strain. Because social care isn't provided directly by the local authority or NHS employees, the cost of that hike is borne by the council and ultimately by us, its taxpayers. Now, I'm a zealot when it comes to reforming the funding of social care. If we get it right, we'll transform the lives of those who need additional care in order to remain independent at home or to remain out of hospital in residential care. And we'll also free up council resources to do the things that only councils do best: invest to drive economic growth, reduce inequality and support the most vulnerable people in their communities. And we might even get away from discussing potholes when we're out canvassing. But Labour have missed the opportunity to grasp this nettle, despite their huge majority. The cross-party talks have included only one meeting to date. There is another one in the diary, but Baroness Casey's final report will take years to conclude and will run into the hard political reality of a general election. and we can't afford to continue to kick this political football into touch. Now, Liberal Democrats have put forward idea after idea, from a statutory guarantee of respite care to a carer's minimum wage, and we stand ready to participate fully in these talks and consider any reasonable idea if only the government showed more resolve to arrive at a solution. The Prime Minister needs to address this issue with urgency, reconvene and lead those cross-party talks and lead the way to a solution that will transform the lives of carers, the cared for and everyone in society. Our amendment calls on him to do that, and I urge you to support it and this excellent motion as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Would Councillor Chris Lucas from North Hertfordshire and Stevenage please stand by? I now call to speak against the motion Tony Vickers from West Berkshire.
Conference, I agree with everything Zoe and Helen have said, but I'm asking you to vote against this motion, and I'll explain why. I've been a councillor for 20 years out of the last 30 years, and as a chartered surveyor, I've spent most of that time also researching how we can have a sustainable, fair, progressive property tax system in local government. The reason I want you to vote against or sit on your hands and not vote at all is this is not really a policy motion. This is a hand-wringing motion. It doesn't deserve to be on your conference agenda. 2 years ago, we had almost exactly the same motion. It was called a crisis in local government funding then. It's now an emergency. Yes, it is an emergency, particularly on the social care side. So if you are going to vote for it, please include Amendment 1. Conference, we have policies already. We've had them for 20 years. Let me remind you what is on our policy framework going back to then. In fact, the first working party on policy I ever took part in was in 1995, and that's the last time we've had a particular study of local government finance. When we've looked at taxation, local government taxation has been an afterthought. It's not really been fully developed. But in 2006, in the tax policy paper, Fairer, Simpler, Greener, we agreed, and I quote, that in the longer term, we would achieve radical change by developing policies on land tax, policies in the plural. Then in 2013, Fairer Taxes, the next policy paper on taxation, said that we would launch consultation on how to implement land value tax in the next Parliament, i.e. by 2019. In 2018, we did indeed, thanks to Andrew Dixon, who did all the work himself with a team of researchers, we passed through conference the commercial landowner levy, which would reform business rates onto a land value tax basis. The next year, he tried to do the same with council tax. It didn't even get on the council agenda. But we do have a very good step towards land value tax with the proportional property tax, which you can find out about on Fairer Share. Conference is not the time to tell you why those are good policies, but I want you to reject the motion because it fails to reflect our existing policy. It is not for want of it being an urgent matter, but it lacks urgency in the need to develop existing policies now so that we're ready for responsible Liberal Democrat government. Everyone knows, every party on my council knows that our local government finance system is a mess. We need to be showing up and being daring about what our alternative policies are. Do what we promised 13 years ago to do. Decide on the detail of how to implement a land value tax both at local and at national level. Yes, we're known to be a caring party. Yes, we believe in fairness. Let's dare as well. Be fair, care and dare. Conference, sit on your hands or vote against this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Would Councillor Wendy Taylor from Newcastle City please stand by? Now called to speak in favour of the motion, Councillor Chris Lucas from North Hertfordshire and Stevenage.
Conference. In May last year, the Liberal Democrats took control of Hertfordshire County Council for the first time, the first non-Conservative administration in the county's history. That deserves a round of applause. Thank you. And when I was asked by our leader, Councillor Steve Jarvis, to take on the resources and performance portfolio with responsibility for the county's £1.2 billion and to serve the needs of 1.1 residents, I accepted the role with relish, eagerly anticipating how I can use the budget to drive through innovation, fund the transformational changes and provide the resources necessary to spearhead the cultural changes and make a real demonstrable difference between a Liberal Democrat administration and a tired, moribund Conservative administration bereft of any new ideas and positivity. Given the number of name badges I've seen containing the letters CLLR on them over the last couple of days, clearly we Liberal Democrats are the lifeblood of local government. But sometimes we forget that for most normal people, all politics is local. It's where the potholes get filled, where library doors open, where vulnerable children get support, where an elderly person receives the care that allows them to live their lives with dignity. To most of our residents, local government is not an abstract concept, it's the practical machinery of life. But right now, that machinery is running on fumes. Over the last decade and more, funding to councils has been cut dramatically. In Hertfordshire, where I come from, Fair Funding Review has stripped us of over £40 million over the next 3 years. The stark reality of these funding cuts means that we have no choice but to look into everything that we do and try to squeeze an already tightly squeezed budget even further. I came into the job wanting to do more with more. I had no idea that I was to become the man with the sickle and the scythe. Because as demand for our services keeps rising, central government keeps cutting them. Due to years of Tory underinvestment, our roads continue to crumble at an alarming rate. We have an ageing population who are increasingly exposed to the ravages of the cost of living crisis and more children than ever in need of SEND. Despite all of this, in Hertfordshire, we've managed to balance our books for 2 years, but I know we're amongst the lucky ones. Due to the tectonic plates of financial settlements constantly shifting underfoot, I know that some councils are teetering dangerously close to the edge. Some councils perform miracles in balancing the books. Some have had no choice but to sell assets, run down reserves and pare back on non-statutory services. We've also had to innovate and think creatively on how, when and why we deliver council services. But sadly, resources portfolio holders are not sorcerers, trying to find the right incantation to turn base metals into gold. Innovation cannot replace adequate funding. You cannot balance the books forever when the numbers simply do not add up. So that's why I urge you to support this motion, because it gets to the heart of two fundamental principles: trusting local democracy and funding it properly. It calls for sustained, real terms increase in core funding, a fair distribution of resources based on need, a long-term solution.
Please draw your remarks to a close.
Special educational needs. Conference, please support this motion and all the amendments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris. Would Luke Taylor, MP from Sutton, please stand by, and I'll call to speak in favour of the motion Councillor Dr. Wendy Taylor from Newcastle City.
Good morning, Conference. Tony Vickers has just told us that this motion isn't urgent. For social care, it really is. If we're going to make a difference to the Casey Commission and make sure it isn't yet another failed review, we have to come up with a long-term solution for tackling social care. Local councils are facing ever-increasing costs of social care due to increasing age and frailty and complexity, and we do need that urgent solution. And there's also a huge amount of time and money being wasted by the NHS and councils bickering over who pays for what, particularly continuing health care, whilst the patients languish in hospital waiting for a decision. It's just not good enough. Adult social care should matter to all of us. Even if we do not use social care today, most of us will either need it in the future, support someone who does, or rely on the communities it helps sustain. At its best, it helps adults of all ages to live the life that they want and do the things that matter most to them. But for too long, the system has been underfunded, understaffed and complex to navigate. We've had decades in which attempts to decide on the best way to fund social care have been used as a political football, and they have all failed so far. We urgently need cross-party talks to agree a long-term solution. Now, that could be income tax, it could be a national insurance scheme. The Liberal Democrats favour free personal care and that people should only pay for their accommodation costs, but we are willing to work with others to come up with a sensible solution. The Local Government Association of which I'm the chair of the Health and Wellbeing Committee, has launched a major consultation on adult social care. It's called Care Where We Live, and it's to make sure that Baroness Casey's commission gets the views of everyone involved in local government: councillors, officers, the voluntary sector, those with lived experience and their carers. And I urge everyone here to give their views. You can do that by going to the LGA website. The committee I chair is cross-party, and at a local government level, it's amazing the amount of consensus we managed to achieve. Let's make sure we have those national cross-party talks and reach a consensus nationally that we can all support. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Would Keith Howkins from Amber Valley please stand by? Now called to speak in favour of the motion, Luke Taylor, who is a councillor and MP for Sutton and Chin.
Thank you very much, Conference. This motion is critical because the crisis in local government funding touches every corner of the country. In my role as London spokesperson, I've knocked on doors across London and heard residents speak about the cost of living crisis, struggling public services and their growing despair. I heard their anger at the previous Conservative government and now their growing disappointment with this Labour government. London is a city of 8 million people, where 1 in 4, and that's a full 2.3 million people, live in poverty. For non-white households, that rises to 38%. For single-parent households, more than half live in poverty. Teachers across London know that any given time, at least one child in their classroom is likely to be living in temporary accommodation. Year after year, London councils have been asked to do more with less. The funding formula has not been properly updated for over a decade, and it still fails to properly account for housing costs, the single biggest factor shaping poverty in our city. When rent alone can swallow more than half of someone's income, ignoring housing costs means ignoring the reality of inner London. We were told there would be no return to austerity, yet the government's funding review effectively doubles down on cuts. Over the next 3 years, per capita funding from central government will fall across most inner London boroughs. Camden, Lambeth, Southwark, Lewisham, Wandsworth, Greenwich, Hammersmith and Fulham, Islington, Westminster and Kensington and Chelsea all face further cuts in funding. So, Conference, I will be supporting this motion because in London and across the country, councils are being pushed to the limit. We need a sustained, real terms increase in core funding for local government. We need a funding formula that reflects the real cost of living in cities like London, one that recognises housing costs and poverty, not one that pretends they do not exist. We need a long-term solution to the SEND crisis that is driving councils towards financial collapse, and we need a fair, sustainable, multi-year settlement to let civic chambers take back control of their finances, to plan ahead and invest in their community's future rather than constantly firefighting just to keep services going. Being Liberal Democrats, putting local people at the heart of what we do and giving them control is what we do best. And we do know that the best way to do that is to make sure everyone lives in a properly and sustainably funded, democratic, active local government that is rooted in community politics. So back this motion and let's keep fighting for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Would Councillor Bill Revens from Bridgewater and West Somerset stand by to submit the motion? And now called to speak in favour of the motion, Keith Howkins from Amber Valley. Keith is a first-time speaker at this conference.
Thank you, Conference. I support the motion, but as well as having adequate and fair funding, councils need to have the freedom to spend the funding as they wish according to local priorities. I've worked in local and central government for over 30 years, and in that period there's been an increasing centralisation of funding, so that local authorities are increasingly just acting as agents of the state now, rather than the innovators that they used to be. 20 years ago, school funding was taken out of general local authority funding and put in a separate grant, because the government of the day were worried that authorities would spend the funding on potholes. Now there's a separate potholes funding stream which councils have to report back onto the government because they're worried they might spend some of that on children. Returning to education funding, I think a lot of the inflexibilities in the system have hampered authorities' attempts to deal with the high needs issue. Increasingly, calculation of school budgets is determined by the national funding formula. Local authorities have lost that flexibility to determine how resources are distributed locally. However, academy trusts still have the ability to top, slice and pull, but they're not locally accountable. Then within the schools budget, there's ring fencing for the schools element, and authorities have to get permission to transfer significant amounts to high needs, and that's quite a bureaucratic process, as I know from my own experience. But a lot of high needs expenditure is actually outside the dedicated schools grant, and it's in general local authority funding. So if you have a higher cost placement, but you could make savings on the home to school transport bill, you can't offset one against the other because they're in different budgets, and vice versa. Similarly, if your numbers of EHCPs are rising and you need to spend more on educational psychologists or the administration of the system, then you can't fund that from the very welcome increase there's been in high needs budgets in the DSG, because they're in separate budgets. And the basic architecture of the system has remained unchanged for 20 years under all governments. Clearly, with the SEN review, there is an opportunity to review this. The system is likely to remain unchanged for the next couple of years in any case. I think there's a temptation for all parties to look at their priorities and say, oh, we're in favour of a ring-fenced grant, but that does not help local authorities in making themselves relevant, autonomous and independent in response to local priorities. So I hope in the future our party will support the review but vote against ring fencing wherever it arises. Please vote for the motion.
Thank you, Keith. After the next speaker, we are moving to the votes on the amendment and the motion, so please get your voting cards ready. I now call to speak in favour of the motion to summate on the motion Councillor Bill Revens from Bridgewater and West Somerset. Bill is leader of Somerset Council.
Conference, I'm curious. I wonder how many of you have ever delivered a leaflet with a picture of a Liberal Democrat pointing at a pothole. Well, I certainly have. And I'm very proud as leader of Somerset Council that in spite of a financial emergency, this year we have so far fixed 1,276 potholes in Somerset. And I know that colleagues throughout the country, from Cornwall to Westmoreland, from Shropshire to Hull, will know that never before in the history of local government have the Liberal Democrats fixed more potholes than we have this year alone. But Mayor Peake, when he spoke earlier, was absolutely right. We need to stop pointing at the potholes, and we need to start pointing at the causes of the potholes. We were rightly exhorted to pick a ward and win it after the general election of 2015. Not only did we do that, we did that 3,200 times with the number of councillors that we have elected, and we have done it with 75 councillors with Lib Dem administrations and 43 with a majority. We should be proud of the traditions and history that we have in local government in the Lib Dems. Zoe was absolutely right when she said the system of local government is broken. And Helen's amendment absolutely builds on that, because one of the main reasons is because of the increasing demand and costs of social care. It is absolute insanity to fund the system of caring for our most vulnerable people, those who need adults and children's social care, out of a tax
on 1991 property values. As that tax fails to meet the need that is growing and the costs that are growing every year, so councils across the country, as so many contributors to this debate have pointed out, are having to look and make those tough decisions about where we spend our money. Tony, I hear what you say about land value taxation and our policies from 1995 and 2006. But respectfully, we have had years of austerity and inflation since then. We did not have, in our last general election manifesto, a policy to replace council tax or look at local government funding beyond replacing business rates. We need to update that, and that's what lines 87 to 96 do in this motion. Chris spoke passionately about the situation in Hertfordshire. Wendy spoke passionately about the need for the urgency of the Casey review and for us to contribute to it. Luke, absolutely, we need to link this to equalities and the impact in London. And Keith, yes, local councils need that freedom to spend their money as local priorities see fit. Conference, I urge you to support this motion. We are a party that has built our success at Westminster on the foundations of our success at local government. You only need to walk around and see the number of badges at conference with the word councillor on them to know that we are a party of local government. But my challenge to the Liberal Democrats and to conference from now on is that we need to be the voice for local government, stand up for local democracy and make sure that our residents get the services, the standards of services that they deserve in all our communities. Please vote for the motion and vote for the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bill. We're now moving to the votes on the amendment on the motion. Could I have the lights up, please? Just a couple of things to note before we do that. We had more than twice as many cards as I could have time to call, so I'm really sorry. There were a lot of very highly qualified people who wanted to speak. We couldn't fit in. Many apologies to them. Secondly, there are a few people who have managed to sneak into the top section of the auditorium above the barrier. Actually, that section is supposed to be closed, so when we finish voting, could you please move down to the lower section? My note doesn't say what happens to you if you stay there, but I assume it's going to be highly unpleasant. So, we now have two votes, and for online voters, the voting is already open. First vote is on Amendment 1, which you'll find in Conference Daily. Could I see all those voting in favour of Amendment 1? Thank you very much. Can I now see all those voting against Amendment 1? Don't think I can see anyone. Oh, there's a couple, yeah. A small number. Just check the online vote. That is very clearly carried. We now vote on the main motion as amended by Amendment 1. Could I see all those in favour of the motion? Thank you very much. And can I now see all those against the motion? Yes, there are a few. We'll just wait for the online votes to catch up. That is very clearly carried. Thank you very much indeed, Conference. Thank you to everyone who spoke. I'd like to thank my aide, Charlie Husted, and my hall aide, Alison Jenner. We're now just taking a few minutes break to set up the stage for the next session, so don't go anywhere. Thank you, Conference.
Good morning, conference. Can I please ask everyone to take their seats and to do so in my usual phrase when I'm chairing, quietly, quickly and safely, please. Those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Nick DaCosta, I'm the chair of Conference Committee. Thank you very much to everyone for being such wonderful members over this conference weekend. It's been a fantastic experience. And I'm now delighted to hand over to the party president, Josh Babarindi.
Hello, lovely people. What a conference, eh? On behalf of all of us, I want to say a set of massive thank yous to many people, because none of what's happened at this conference happens by magic, even if it often looks like it does. So to all the staff at the Barbican, and indeed the people of York, thank you. You have put up with a very large